Howdy, howdy, y'all. Welcome back to Some Antics. Happy Tuesday. Um, I am excited to be here, and I'm excited to be joined by the one, the only, the Anna E. Cook. Anna, hello. How's it going?
Hi. Oh, it's going well. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, it's just it's been a good day. I got to see my family dog today, which was always a good thing. Um, and My little cat is perched up asleep on the bed to my side. You know, things could be much worse.
Indeed, mine are on the couch sitting in the sunbeam that comes from my window. So
Oh man,
um, they're being very productive today.
working hard.
Yes.
Those tireless coworkers.
They're always on me. HR is very watching me very closely, but they're the best coworkers I could ever have. So I'll take it.
Well, it's great to have you. I had seen you around Twitter several times, but I first like really became like exposed to your work through your AxeCon talk. You spoke at the accessibility conference AxeCon back in March, I believe that was. And that was about this subject, about auditing accessibility on websites. And I'm excited to have you on. And before we kind of dive into it, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, as mentioned, my name is Anna E. Cook, E for branding. I'm a senior accessibility designer for Northwestern Mutual, and up until this point in my career, I've been kind of advocating and pushing for accessibility within product designer roles and UX designer roles. And so, I finally landed the dream job. I get to be an accessibility designer, and so part of that is auditing and reviewing work for accessibility, you know, meeting accessibility needs, which is, I think really important for us to do as designers, developers, QA.
Hmm.
Everybody should be involved in some way, shape, and form. But for me, I really want designers to feel like they can do this and that they should do this because we can shift our emphasis left and do a lot in design. So, that'll be the subject for our stream today, doing some auditing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with auditing, I kind of have two questions for you, and I think that the answers to these questions are going to be kind of intertwined. So I'm gonna, I guess, kind of ask them as one chunk. First of all, what is the goal of an accessibility audit? And second of all, do you have any personas or target audiences in mind when you prepare an audit?
Great questions. So when it comes to an accessibility audit, of course it's going to depend on your audience, but the goal is to capture issues that exist in designs, a live experience, anything in between, uh, that can be captured using automated testing as well as manual testing. And we want to capture those, especially sooner than later, because we want to make sure that we're putting things out there that are accessible and usable. And so, we want to help folks on our teams understand that these things are occurring. The amazing thing about accessibility audits is that, excuse me while I continually adjust in my chair, um, the amazing thing is that we can use them to map to trending needs and trending issues where we can say, like, for example, this color combination on our primary call to action has, and this is the easy example, of course, but doesn't have enough color contrast. We can map that to fundamental elements in our designs and our development, and our code, and fix them very holistically. So that's kind of, the way we can show our teams what is occurring, ways we can fix it, and ways we can fix it as simply as possible,
Mhm.
um, foundationally. And then, to speak to the second one, question, who what kind of personas do we keep in mind? I think, it of course again will depend on the audit. Some audits we're doing specific screen reader testing, and that will
Mhm.
focus more on users who are blind or have low vision. But then, others will do things like we're just testing, within the designs in Figma themselves that will have some limitations in
Mhm.
terms of our personas. Um, when we're using, when we're using the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, we tend to look at personas pretty holistically, but it can depend on the goals of your audit and the time that you have and the tools you've got.
Awesome. And so who are you expecting to use this audit? Like, are you expecting that product owners will be using this, designers, developers?
Great question. Yeah, so I think in my in the most common situation is that everybody will use the audit, at least in my experience. But how they use the audit is very different. So for product owners, I tend to put together like summaries and things like that, because if you send them a spreadsheet with a bunch of audit items, I think you can watch their brains explode a little bit. But with designers and developers, you've got that whole audit itself, so they can start doing specific fixes and
Hmm.
looking at the exact code and snippets that are affected. And I might have misunderstood what you meant by persona. I was
No,
thinking about,
I
yeah.
I think that was excellent though. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Well, it depends again on the audit itself, but I generally assume that everyone on a team is going to see that. But I will always try to put together a presentation summarizing the results so folks don't,
Hmm.
implode.
Okay. And what are, I guess, some of the like high priority things you want to communicate in the audit?
I think the highest, let's see, when I'm using these audits, what I'm trying to communicate is how, I mean, sort of touching on this a little bit again, but like, I feel like when in the past people have presented audits, they'll present, line items up to hundreds of items.
Hmm.
My goal with these tends to be very, I'm biased as a designer. It tends to be very design oriented, where I will
Hmm.
flag elements that are consistently occurring, and say like, hey, we could change just a little bit of our design and our code, and that would fix it
Mm.
across the experience. That is the power of looking at this, at audits the way we should as designers and product owners and even developers. But additionally, giving them the tools to understand the specifics, like how severe is
Hmm.
the issue that we've encountered. If it's an A criteria, the minimum expected criteria in WCAG, then we're going to consider it more critical or serious. When it comes to double A, or we'll probably most likely consider it critical or serious, at least, or depending on the item. And then, AAA, we're going to still capture those and say, like, hey, those are some things we should be mindful of and consider when we're working on these. So I feel like I may have rambled answering this
No,
question,
you're good.
but code snippets, specifics, uh, URLs. Oh, I also I use these as an opportunity to recommend ways to fix things. So if I've captured something like, hey,
Hmm.
this form label isn't being semantically tied to the form input itself, I can be like, hey, like if we just, you know, tie these together in some code and did that across on the fundamental form field element, we could fix all of this. And that's all we have to do.
All right. I am excited to dive into this, but before we do, I want to, I guess, kind of get a question from the chat. We've got Joe asking, when you audit sites, do you stick entirely to WCAG, or are you also drawing on your own experiences of best practices, which may or may not be entirely reflected in WCAG?
Oh, that's a question that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on the maturity of the org, I think, in terms
Okay.
of like their accessibility understanding. Um, where like for example, I'm coming off a big migraine from yesterday. I will capture things that I notice that are likely to trigger migraines
Mm-hmm.
if I know the team and they know me well enough to kind of have that conversation. But if it's a team that's really early in their accessibility, you know, life or understanding, I'll try to stick with WCAG just so they can start to understand the primary and most fundamental elements early. So I would love it if sites were less likely to trigger migraines because those are not fun. So that's as an example. So
Awesome. Well, thank you. I want to dive into this. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna now share my screen. Y'all, this is Anna's Twitter. Go follow Anna on Twitter. You're not gonna regret it. Seriously, absolutely one of the best accessibility follows you could have. And also, I see. First of all, thank you to everyone who's shown up and everyone who's been following. And thank you, Michael Chan, for gifting that sub to Stephanie. Semantics now has subscriptions, so I'm working on getting all the emotes working. But in the meantime, have a cool tuna. If you subscribe, you'll get that cool tuna emote. And just full disclosure, I am hoping to use subscription money to be able to fund closed captions down the road. So just know that if you do subscribe, it's going to a good cause. Yeah, so you sent me ahead of time this template that you use. And so we're going to be kind of working our way through. Actually, would you like to describe kind of what we're going to be doing today?
yeah, so I will mention that this template is available to anybody who I believe I shared it after AxeCon. I can share it today, but just know
Yeah.
that like this template is available to everybody. And so what we'll be doing today is we'll put together a little bit of our audits for a couple of folks who have been brave enough to volunteer as tribute. And and we'll go through the process of kind of talking through some of the things we should capture in that process and how we can capture them. And what we're looking at right now is our background. Now, in this case, when I'm putting together an audit sheet, I will put together usually a background page because you never know, who's coming in here and when. You want to make sure that they understand, things like when did they review this? Like how relevant, like
Mm-hmm.
if this audit's from 2007, which I hope they were doing audits in 2007, but if the audit's from a long time ago, the results may be less relevant. The URLs that were reviewed, the review process, what levels of WCAG we're hoping to meet, or above and beyond, or not above and beyond, but
Mm-hmm.
the things we'd love to include. And so that's what we're kind of looking at right now. You never know who's coming in, at any time. So having that for yourself or for your team, whoever you're sharing it with, can be
Mm-hmm.
really helpful.
That's I think that's great. And so I'm looking at the background here, and I'm sure we'll end up filling this out. And then you've also got this audit tab that has it's got a lot of fun stuff. Website, component item, WCAG guideline, the description, the recommendation, impact, URL. So these are the like high value things that we're gonna be communicating and formalizing as we audit. And like you mentioned, we had some delightful, some lovely volunteers who volunteered their personal sites for us to audit. So we're actually going to be testing those out together. Um, and
Yes.
was there one you'd like to start with, Anna?
Well, I think I would like to start with Alexa's site. Alexa is a social media specialist, and she does some great topics on accessibility in social media.
All
So
right.
let's see.
I think it was it iamalexa.com? Was that what it was? I don't have the sheet up.
The real Alexa,
The real Alexa. Thank
.com.
you. Michael, Adrian, thank you so much for the subs. I appreciate it. Yeah, so here it is. Here's Alexa's site. Alexa was actually the first person to reach out to us with her website, and I'm incredibly grateful. So we're here at the site. Obviously, there's infinitely many ways you could test a site. What do you typically do to start?
Well, personally, I start with opening my inspector and running an automated audit using the Axe plugin. Um, now I'm not. I feel like every time I talk about it, I sound like I'm like buy the product, but they're really good, and it always makes me feel a little less intimidated when I start an audit to just start with using the Axe plugin and seeing some of the high level things they capture by default. So I'll usually use that first.
Yeah, I am going to put a link to Axe in the chat. If you've never used this, it's great. You I think there's a community edition. Pretty sure there's a look at that. I know this
Oh,
person.
oh, I didn't I didn't realize I was actually on the site.
That's
Um,
awesome.
well, that's
Wow.
fun.
Well, apparently you're on the site. That's really cool. Yeah, so Axe DevTools is such a fantastic tool for this. We've already got a hype train going. I don't know these Twitch things. Yeah, so Axe DevTools, fantastic tool for this job. And it is built out by DQ Systems. Again, fantastic resource. So you just give it a scan
Yeah.
all my page.
Well, in this case, since we're auditing a full experience, we can scan the full page. And I'll mention real quick, since we have the look for scan part of my page, that I use that one more for auditing design systems themselves. So like
Okay.
specific components and stuff like that. If I don't want to have to capture the nav every single time I'm auditing in Storybook or something. But since we're doing full experience, let's do scan all of my page.
All right. I also don't have an account to be able to scan only part of it. So, okay. We've got a few issues. The first says ID attribute value must be unique. We need unique landmarks, and all page content should be contained by landmarks.
Yeah, that's see, especially with a page or with a page like this, we probably won't capture too many issues because, it's mostly a photo. We've got our navigation and our footer. But the landmarks thing is really interesting because didn't Alexa highlight to us that she's using, they're using GoDaddy to host and build this site. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes. And so it sounded like there were issues like GoDaddy limited the length of the alt text that Alexa was
Mhm.
able to use for this big old cover. Um, yeah, let's dive into that landmarks one. Let's try to understand. Um, landmarks
What's
should have.
interesting, excuse me, what's interesting is that it's flagging an issue, which is one reason I'm going to hijack this for a sec.
Go ahead.
Automated testing is not perfect. It requires manual review, and we can see that as evident right now because we've got two landmark issues that seem to be conflicting. So, or they may be conflicting. But anyway, go on, Ben. Apologies for the interruption.
No, you're good. So this first one says ensure landmarks are unique. So we've got this problem of like there's this nav here, and it's suggesting that basically this nav hasn't been titled, so there's no ARIA label or ARIA labeled by, or can you just straight up use the title attribute for that? Today I learned. And
I
if
think,
we
yes, I
inspect
think
the
so.
node, it's the links up here at the top seems to be what's getting flagged. Okay, but that would suggest to me that there's probably a second nav on the page. Is this a
Possible.
nav down here in the footer? That there's two navs. That could be part of it if there are two navs, right?
Div. It's reading as a div block,
Yeah. Let's
I
see.
think.
Hmm. It's also tagging
Goodness.
it as a best practice. Um, and I believe this is a minor one. Oh, it's a moderate issue. Okay.
We
So,
could
yeah.
one thing to point out here, if you scroll up, is we can select the more info link at the top, and DQ has resources on what the issue is in particular and why they are assessing it as moderate. So landmarks are, um, they're specifically quite helpful for screen reader users because
Mhm.
they can help screen reader users navigate pages much more simply. Landmarks essentially break down your page's essential elements into different sections programmatically. And so it's really helpful to have them and
Mhm.
to do them well and to have each landmark be unique so that screen reader users can um, can go understand which section they're going to before they go there.
Absolutely.
Um, so I would actually think it's pretty likely, though, that the reason that this is getting flagged is more of a GoDaddy issue and not an Alexa thing. I would expect it because this is a common thing I encounter when I'm reviewing websites that are on content management systems. Like I'm on Squarespace,
Hmm.
and they, if I remember correctly, they have the same issue on my website happening. And I think it's largely because content management systems as a whole aren't particularly well versed in some of these things yet.
Yeah. Um, okay. Yeah, so I guess let's take a look at this other one that says all page content should be contained by landmarks. Again, this is flagged as a best practice. Um, there is a div with the cookie banner. So this is that like agreement that you're um, that like you're accepting the site's cookies. So I could see how this would totally float outside of any mains or anything like that, just because that's kind of its purpose is to be outside the context of the rest of the page.
Mm, yes, I think so. Um, I'm going to add that actually to, and how we mark the impact on this is going
Yeah.
to depend a little bit, but I'm going to add that to our spreadsheet here real
Yes.
quick.
Let me. Okay, so you're typing this up for us. Yeah. Can you kind of walk us through how you're describing this?
Yeah, so let's see. Excuse me. I'm gonna be looking at this from the perspective of, I know Alexa is somebody who cares about accessibility quite a lot. And so, even though this is considered a moderate issue according to DQ, I still think it's worth flagging, um, or a best practice. So, I've basically pulled up on the first, words are hard, excuse me. In the website area, I've linked to Alexa's site and mentioned her name. Since we're auditing multiple websites today, or hopefully we will.
Hmm.
And then the item, um, I'm actually going to do something where I'm going to adjust the page here. So I'm going to go ahead
Okay.
and pull the URL up sooner in our spreadsheet because
Ah.
I want people to know, I want Alexa to know in particular, which is one of the reasons, segue real quick. You can edit the way this format is and for your purposes anytime. It's not perfect or linear or static. You can change these audits for your audience, but what I'm getting to is I want Alexa to know that the particular URL that I'm talking about is her homepage. Um, so let's see here. The specific, I will link to the specific WCAG guideline in most cases so that folks can understand what I'm talking about and how it relates to our goodness gracious, our accessibility criteria. But the difference, of course, in this case is that DQ is not flagged it as a WCAG item, um, because it's considered best practice. So for the time being, I'm going to mark that as best practice, but I might come back to this later and say, like, well, is it best practice? Like, maybe we should be thinking about it in terms of info and relationships,
Okay.
WCAG. Now, again, this is not me saying that my process is perfect or infallible, but info and relationships, that's going to be 1.3.1 level A. And the criteria there is information structure and relationships conveyed through presentation can be programmatically determined or are available in text. So I actually think I've used this one as a reference for landmarks before. I'm going to use that here because it is best practice, but like I
Yeah.
think I think we should relate it to something, right?
Absolutely. And plus, when you relate it to a success criterion like this, it gives like a handy link that you can look back to and see why it's actually important. Like there's more resources given by pointing to a specific criterion, I feel.
Yeah, I think so too. Even like I know it can, it's not exactly clear cut sometimes what thing is tied to what WCAG item you're looking at, but it's just so helpful to have that background and resources there.
Hmm.
So I've added 1.3.1. I've actually also added a link to, excuse me, my favorite resource, the quick reference guide, so that folks could jump immediately to that and learn more. And then I've just sort of copied and pasted the description in this case. But how do we recommend fixing this?
And this
If
is,
the it,
yeah,
sorry,
this is, are we specifically calling out the cookie widget or the nav that didn't seem to be labeled?
let's call up a nav because I think the cookie widget. Let's sorry. Navigate. What was the exact thing that was happening there in the
Um,
navigation?
for the nav, it was saying that landmarks, ensure landmarks are unique. Um, so landmarks should have. Yeah, actually, do you want me to copy paste this issue description in there for you?
Yeah, that would be great.
Let's do it. All right. Boom. I'll paste the value only, so it maintains formatting. So that's
Perfect.
what Axe gave me.
Yes, I think that makes sense. And the I would say the recommendation here is going to be I always try to be mindful of the limitations that people might be facing with recommendations. Like
Hmm.
if this is something that comes from GoDaddy, then we have to be thinking about like, well, how can they fix it? Like, is it something that's being baked into their ability to, or rather, what they're giving me to make my website, or is
Hmm.
it something that I can fix? And I can't answer that
Yeah.
question, but at a high level, we would just say ensure landmarks are unique. Um, validate, in this case for Alexa, I'll say validate if the issue is occurring because of GoDaddy. And I know GoDaddy has some sort of content management system of their own. So I think there's a possibility that that will be on their side. And I'm going to flag this as I'm going to flag it. Now, how do we assess impact is, of course, dependent on a few things, but
Hmm.
um, because I know Alexa is somebody who's passionate about accessibility and most likely wants something to be accessible, I'm going to flag it as moderate
Okay.
because of that. Though Alexa can assess her priorities and adjust that consideration accordingly. Excuse me.
Gotcha. So I guess as I'm looking through this and thinking like through all the information that we've provided about this specific um, issue that's come up is um, I guess I'm wondering like would would you also want to document things like steps to reproduce or how this issue was discovered in the first place?
Yes. Well, that's a super important question because when you're generating an audit, and Axe will generate these audits into spreadsheets automatically for you, I think on the premium version, it'll come with all of those details usually by default. So some folks, in this case, this is the bare minimum of what we can include the audit. I mean,
Hmm.
but in some cases I'll include like code snippets. I will include if it's an automated or a manual test. I mean, every automated test has manual review in my case. I'm not just copy pasta-ing it, but um, I'll capture that. And then steps to produce. Now, I have done that in some audits and others I haven't, and it just depends on who is going to. So yes, short answer is yes. I would recommend including those things, especially if you think they're helpful.
Hmm.
Um, in this case, for Alexa, I mean, it's hard for me to say.
Okay. Sounds good. And then circling back to the fact that, these issues were flagged not by, or not like connected to success criteria, but rather to best practices. We've got a question in the chat from Carl who asks, when an item is, quote, best practice, do you consider it a fail in the audit, or is this just a recommendation?
Um, I think that's an interesting, let me think here. Generally speaking, I don't say it's a fail if I've measured it as a best practice. However, I will still capture it so that they know that these ideals exist. And so I would say, like, my migraine example, my
Mhm.
maybe perhaps the high saturation of bright colors in a single viewport issue, I would probably flag that as best practice because it's not explicitly outlined in WCAG, but I
Mhm.
would still want people to know it's something that's happening. So I wouldn't call it a fail, but I would call it a recommendation. But again, it depends on the person and the audience. Like, if I know somebody really wants the most accessible possible experience, like, it's kind of tricky. Like, there's
Mhm.
a human factor that goes into this that I guess I'm struggling to describe.
I think that's totally fair. Yeah, so tailor your responses and the amount of information you include to the audience that you're trying to present this audit to, and what you believe their commitment and understanding to accessibility is.
Exactly. Now, like, if I'm worried that a team will, they'll look at something like that and go, well, you only were supposed to capture like the WCAG items, then I won't include it. And that's not to say that I don't want the world to be as accessible as possible, but I just want teams to take it in as they need it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Um, so should we document a few more issues that we saw?
Yes. So let's go ahead. I'm actually wondering about some other pages on Alexa's site. Would we be interested? I know we have a couple other issues on this page, but we've talked
Yeah.
about landmarks. So,
So I believe most of these are external links, but we can check out um, her about pages. So um, we also have the cookie widget. There's a big old hero image and some text on the side. I could see, and we'll run the audit, but I could see potential alt tag issues with these images that are here. Um, all right. Yeah. Okay.
it looks
So
like
good.
um it looks like the links are clear. She's done a good job of if we scroll down, like,
Yeah.
it looks like, because one of the common things we encounter with links is making sure they're apparent in body content. So she's, I want to give my shout out, right? Like, she's made those bold and underlined so that they're not just
Yes.
relying on color. um that's good. And actually, you mentioned something that I want to touch back on. um the navigation items going to external websites, would do those open in a new tab by default?
Let's see. So that's an internal link. That's external. So I'm just gonna click this a normal click. That is opening in a new tab.
So then we might actually capture that as something that we, now let's see, is it letting users know that it's going to open in it? And we're starting to move into a manual process right
Sure.
now. Um, does the code, it has ARIA?
Aria labeled by nav equals 597. Is this is that this element?
Uh,
You know what? I will open this up in the accessibility tree, and worst comes to worst, we can always just take it to VoiceOver directly, which we will probably do later. It looks like the link is um link about text newsletter. Why is newsletter a child of about? I'm
hmm,
very confused by this, GoDaddy. Um, you know what? Let me just do VoiceOver itself, and we'll
yes,
confirm
let's
this.
see what it does.
All right. There we go. Coming up.
VoiceOver on Chrome.
Okay. So VoiceOver's on, and I'm gonna go ahead and I guess just tab to the accessible.
Chrome has new window.
Thank you.
Entering the Alexa web content. Menu popped up. Visited link. About. List 6 items. You are currently on
That doesn't seem right.
About. Menu pop-up collapsed button.
Oh.
You are currently on a button. Link. About. You menu popped up. Visited. Link. About.
So semantically speaking, sorry, the pun is so good.
It's so good.
It looks like all the nav items are being nested under about.
Yes.
Um,
Or maybe it seemed like there was some aria labeled by going on. Hang on, let me shut down voiceover real quick.
Voiceover off.
Yeah, it seemed like there was some aria labeled by going on, which was overwriting the name. Yeah, here we go. So aria labeled by equals nav 5973 793. So this is pointing to a different element, which I'm willing to bet you is where's the list? Is this it? Would this be it? I don't, no, that doesn't have a name. I don't know, but it would be somewhere in this chunk, I think.
Interesting.
But it's pointing to like a different element for its name, and so all of these are being announced as about, even though they have other text contents. I highly doubt. I could be wrong, but I highly doubt. Actually, my suspicion is that this is probably something GoDaddy's doing. In which case,
I would agree. I think there's a good chance that that this was not the intended behavior here, and I am trying to figure out
yeah,
how. Of course, some of these things I will mention, as a designer, like sometimes I have limitations in terms of my understanding of what's occurring. So having been here is super, super helpful.
yeah. So I found
but-
it.
Oh, there we go.
It's this. It's the UL, because this is a nav with an unordered list with a bunch of list items. But all of those links that are in there inside each of those list items, they're using this aria labeled by, pointing it to that unordered list, which itself has the name about. And so as a result, all of these lists are being announced as about, I think, or they're being announced as lists. That's
Fascinating.
fascinating.
How do we? How
Okay.
do we? I'm gonna document this because I'm
Yes.
quite certain that Alexa will want to. Oh, by the way, I can see that she is watching us.
Whoa.
Bless you, Alexa, for volunteering. You are
Alexa, thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Yes, you are
Thank you.
delightful. And we are so excited. Now, in this case, I'm going to say that here's where my practice might differ from others. This affects every page on Alexa's website. So I'm not going to say the URL. I'm just going to say every page because it's navigational.
Okay. Because if you're working in any sort of like CMS, like content management system, or if you're working in any base like if you're working in any component based frameworks, the fix is in one place. It's not on each page. It's fix it in one place, validate that fixes it everywhere.
Yes, exactly. Now this one, since we found it manually, right? We don't get to have a recommended WCAG item associated with it by default.
Okay.
However, how can we? I mean, I'm almost to the point where I'm thinking maybe we should be.
I have a proposal, which is, could we do name role value?
I think that would make sense. I was thinking the same thing. So let's do that.
All right. That is 4.1.2, and I am going to copy this link and send it to the chat.
Perfect.
Oh, that is not the link I meant to send. Let me send a better link.
I'm gonna grab the link from the quick reference guide and put it in the audit.
Good deal. And I will head back to our audit doc.
Now this one we don't have a copy and paste description.
Mhm.
But what we can do, since we tested it, is that what was it? What was the code? Could you grab that code snippet, the UL code snippet, and put it in
Yes.
here?
Yes, I can. Here it selects page, inspect. And you just want the UL selector or the ARIA labeled by.
Let's grab that whole sucker, and I'm gonna do an insert. Is it row or column? I always get mixed up. Insert column. And it didn't do that. There we go.
Just drop
Oh.
it in here.
Yeah, insert that in the new column. Because it's super pertinent in this case. And I'm also going to do something real quick just so that it doesn't. Who would have thought I'd be formatting spreadsheets professionally, but here we are. So we added that code snippet because it's going to be really important for Alexa to reference, whether it's a GoDaddy issue or something that happened on her side. She can at least have that snippet and point it to GoDaddy and say like, hey, this is happening. And like, I had some folks on Twitch stream and audit my website and it's recorded and here it is. Can you fix it? Hopefully, hopefully it'll make it easier for her. Now, in this case, our description is going to be navigational items. Now, tell me if you agree that this makes sense. Are after about all announced about.
I think it was just all nav links we're announcing as about for some reason.
That's better. Navigation items announced as about. Using this, I assume in this case, I'm going to assume that what's happening on VoiceOver would most likely happen on NVDA or JAWS. We haven't tested that, but I'm pretty sure that's what would happen. Using screen reader, and then I would say screen reader users, not sewers, users cannot determine the purpose of a link before selection. And that way, sometimes I'll emphasize the users that are being affected by something like this so that they can understand who is being specifically affected. And in this case, so we won't have time for today, I might even do a screen capture of the VoiceOver issue that's occurring and record it and link to it somewhere so that folks can watch and hear what's being presented to users instead of just having that description. Because otherwise, especially stakeholders in particular, and thank you, Ben, for adding that. Stakeholders in particular are, have trouble kind of understanding without seeing it or hearing it. So if you can do a screen recording, that helps a lot. And I'm actually going to say, tell me if you agree, Ben. I'm going to flag this as critical because it affects the entire navigation.
The links as they are, they will take you where they need to go, but you have no idea what it is they're for. Like that is total information loss there.
Yeah, and it affects how everybody using a screen reader is going to be able to navigate across the experience, which is, yeah. So yeah, critical. We can agree for sure.
Right.
The original reason I had been, and this is the cool thing about accessibility, the original reason I was interested in that is because if the links opened in a new window, it would be helpful to let users on screen readers know specifically, or all users really, that the link would change the page, that it would go to a completely different site. Which actually we could probably flag that as well.
Let's go ahead.
And again, Alexa, thank you for letting us do this. You were such a champ.
I'm going to find, I want to say there's link purpose text only is, I always teach, like, whenever I'm teaching people with CAG, I'm like, I'm always like, don't memorize WCAG guidelines, and then here I am being like, but also I can remember the names of specific frustrating guidelines off the top of my head. Here we go.
Well-
Link purpose, link only.
I think the reason I'm always like, you won't memorize WCAG, but like the more you use it,
Yeah.
the more you're like, yeah, links to it's associated with that sucker, and like,
Mhm.
and it's link purpose link only. You said right?
Yes, link only. So it's
Got
link purpose link only, which is 2.4.9.
Got it. And that's a AAA item too.
So it is. So it wouldn't necessarily be. Well, I guess in that case, though, actually, you know what? Honestly, I might put this down to 2.4.4, which is link purpose in context, because even in context, you still have no idea what this link is doing. So I think and that's a level A, which would reinforce the criticality of this.
So I think you're right. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you there, Ben.
No, you're good.
We can actually, I think this is the fun, the extra fun, and just shows how much of a nerd I am. This could be both, right?
Sure.
And I'm adding this very slowly, and I mixed up the links. Hold on.
Yep.
The spreadsheet part of this is the hardest part of this. Okay. Let's try this again. Ugh. No. Okay, well, anyway, while I'm doing this, what I'm trying to say is that some issues might have multiple WCAG items associated with them. And you can link to both. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I will link to the most relevant only.
Okay.
Now, again, this is going to be another one of those situations where I say, depends on your audience. But I think, for poorly speaking, but for some purposes, I think it's really helpful to link to both so you can kind of speak to, like, if an issue is affecting is A and AA, like you can be like, this is kind of the breadth of that issue. It speaks to the minimum and it speaks to, our expected level of criteria. And if it's A and AAA, then you can be like, it meets or it's about the minimum, but also like doing this goes above and beyond, or not above and beyond, but like makes the experience better,
Yes.
I should say. So that's my thinking there that I'm putting together quite slowly. And linking to that. And all right. So in this case, we may not need a code snippet. Oh, and if there's no code snippet added, I usually add an NA.
Okay.
Just because it helps screen reader users know if they're navigating a spreadsheet to have NA, that is empty. Now, let's see. Not to say that there is no snippet, but that we didn't add it. Talking to myself. Okay.
There's
No,
the comments we've made about like needing to look up WCAG and stuff like that, and like it's resonating with the chat.
Oh,
for
good.
sure. So yeah.
I'm having a brain fart. What was I doing?
This was the links don't indicate that they have an external destination.
Thank
Or
you.
no, it's not that. It's that they open in a new window, right? Or a new tab. That's what it was.
Links open in a new tab without indicating that they do so before selection, something like that.
Yeah, that works.
Now, in this case, I usually will say something like in terms of recommendation. These are navigational items, so people generally don't want to have like an open in new window icon on navigational items. Obviously, that's up to Alexa. At the very least, it should be programmatically indicated. Though ideally, if something opens in a new tab, it should be both visually and programmatically indicated. So in this case, my recommendation would be to, programmatically. And when I say programmatically, I mean ensure that it basically in code is specifying that this action will occur so that screen reader users will be able to know that that will occur. That link opens in new tab. Also, visually indicate opens in new tab. For example, new window. A combination of these things can be really helpful. And since it's an A, I would call it. What would you call it, Ben, in terms of impact?
See, I'm thinking since it's A, but it's also like it's in the nav, and so there may be more of an expectation that it could be external. Kind of wondering if moderate might be a good fit.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I know it's a tricky one, that's for sure. So I think moderate is a reasonable call out there.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. And I didn't add the code snippet, but I think in this case it's not as necessary.
Sure thing.
Awesome. How are we doing on time then? I know I've hijacked a little bit
No,
of
you're
the
good.
conversation.
It is 50 after, so we've got about 10 minutes left. That's probably enough time to maybe report one more issue or do one more form of testing. Or if there's anything else you'd like to talk about regarding your audit process, I would love to explore that as well.
Yeah. Let's see here. So, I'm trying to decide in this moment what is the best thing I can do in the amount of time I have left, which is very existential. We have, let's see, what page were we on?
We were on the Meet Alexa page, which was you clicked about and then Meet Alexa. There's also in media and in writing, and we can also check those out. We haven't seen those yet.
Let's go ahead. I'm doing some quick testing just to see what might be the best thing to inspect.
In the meantime, chat, if you've got any questions for Anna, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure to get to as many of those as we can as well.
Let's do a quick look. And I don't know if we'll be able to add this, but I want to look
Sure.
at the accessibility on social media area or page. I'm
The
also going to link to that too, because I really appreciate Alexa's focus on that.
yes, yeah. Okay. And should we?
Let's maybe do an axe review real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and while you're doing that, we've got a question that's come in. If you or a couple of questions
Feel
actually.
free.
Is there a way to programmatically let folks know content opens in a new tab? Is it just adding that to a title tag? I have seen folks use Aria for that purpose, and Ben, feel free to disagree or add to this. I've seen folks use Aria. I've seen people add non-visible text. I don't think that's necessarily ideal, but I know Aria is one thing that folks tend to lean on in that case.
Aria is probably the cleanest option you could have there. Like you could add, so you could go to your anchor tag and you could add Aria label equals, and then you would want to reproduce the contents of the link. So it would be, for instance, newsletter, and then you might put like in parentheses, opens in new tab. That's one way you could do it. And that I think is kind of the cleanest fix. The other, you were mentioning the hidden text, is you could put like an extra like span inside your anchor tag that says opens a new tab, and then you would want to hide that in a way that's visually hidden but still made accessible to screen readers and other assistive technologies. And to do that, you need some special styles. And so I typically, for those, I go to Scott O'Hara's inclusively hidden. I promote this just about every stream, and at some point Scott's gonna have to pay me that premium. But there is a whole class in here that is included even in many CSS frameworks. I believe Bootstrap has SR only. I think Tailwind has a class for this as well. But basically, the idea is it's not display none because that would keep the content from being exposed to assistive technology in general, but rather it makes the window through which you could see the element impossibly small, which as good as hides the element. So this is what you could apply to a span that sits inside of that anchor tag to hide it, and that span would say like opens in new tab or opens in new window.
Yeah, I would say. And also, Mike May to Awesome mentioned that title doesn't get announced in Mac voiceover. Be aware of, or sorry, beware of that. Generally, ARIA label should be used instead.
Yes.
Which is a helpful call out. We have one more question, and I actually want to answer this one. What myth do you want to bust about accessibility auditing? Ben, do you have an answer for that before I jump in?
I know where this is going. We were chatting about this ahead of time. Please, full steam ahead, Anna.
I think the whole thing about accessibility auditing to keep in mind is that the goal is to find things and fix them. And it's not, you can fix foundational elements more easily than you might realize. But it's not on or off. The power of accessibility auditing is showing your stakeholders how accessibility and inaccessibility can proliferate across an experience with something as minor as color contrast or as big as navigational items being broken. And so that accessibility is not, it's not a light switch, right? It's not on or off. You are not just accessible or unaccessible. There are different parts and pieces that come into play that show the levels of accessibility that your product, your website, anything is meeting across the board. So like that's the myth I want to bust is not about accessibility auditing itself, but about how website accessibility can just magically be turned on using something like an overlay, for example. This practice shows that it's not as easy as that. It shows that there's a lot more to it.
Absolutely. And I like that. So I've had the pleasure to introduce quite a few people to accessibility development and testing and the like. And accessibility, I think, can often feel like a big nebulous cloud, and that is terrifying to try to figure out, like, where do I even start? That is hugely overwhelming. And so doing something like an audit like this, it's nice because it breaks things down into very actionable steps. Like, every single thing that we've written here in a corporate environment would be a story that you could fix, right? A story that you can track progress on. And at the end of it, not only have you completed a thing, you've actually made a measurable impact to the end user experience. And so that I think that really speaks to the value of an audit, not just as like a compliance artifact or as a like wrist slapping tool, but rather as a communication tool for solving problems. I love that.
Yeah, and I know, we're at time, Ben, but I know I'll mention that accessibility auditing when it comes to manual work can take some time. But like as Ben touched on, like each of these turns into stories and actions and like we didn't get to, gosh, we had like 10 different sites that of folks who volunteered and we didn't get to finish Alexa's site, but like all of this alone, fixing specifically that navigation is going to do a lot of good work for Alexa's site. So, yeah.
Anna, thank you so much. I really appreciate having had you on. I want to send people towards your Twitter because, again, if you're not following Anna already, you should be. I highly recommend you do it. Absolutely phenomenal accessibility content, great design input. Cats are good. I like having cats. So yeah. Is there anywhere else I should send people to? I see Adrian's already put your accessibility overlay on there. It is such a fantastic read. Please go read that one as well.
Yeah, I have that pinned to my Twitter right now because I wrote that while a little angry about what they were doing to some folks in our community,
Mhm.
and I you know, if you'd like to read it, I certainly would appreciate it. Some folks find it helpful. Uh, but yes, like right now, that's my biggest thing that's been going on. But some news will be coming out sometime in the next year. I'm working on a book, so like keep your ears open and keep your eyes out on all that. So
All right. Well, y'all, this has been good. Thank you all for showing up. There were at one point there was like at least 56 of y'all. I think that's the most I've had on a stream. So Anna, you bring out all the best people.
oh,
So yeah, y'all, if you stick around, I'm gonna try to find someone to raid, someone in the tech spaces. If you've got any recommendations, put those in the chat. But additionally, join us next week if you've never used the 11D static site generator. We're going to be playing around with that, and I think just absolutely abusing one of its experimental features. We've got Ben Holmes doing that, so it'll be a fun time as well. But y'all, this has been great. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Anna, for joining Semantics.
thank you for having me. It was such a fun time.
Bye, y'all.